So this is the KHOODEELAAR television channel being broadcast only on the internet. And this is part A, timed at 10:20 hours GMT. But the actual broadcast started about 2 or 3 minutes after that time. So this is Thursday, the 2nd of December 2021. So how long is 2nd of December 2021? From 2nd of December 1973 this is calculating the 7th of December. (1973) It's 48 years. So 7th of December, 2nd of December, that is today's date, 2nd of December, not 7th, 2nd of December 1973. 2nd of December 1973 to 2nd of December 2021. That is 48 years. And 48 years have been spent since we launched the campaign. I launched the campaign on the day, in effect, called the Sylhet, Bangladesh Friendship Society. And it was from an address in New Road. That campaign publications began about Sylhet, Bangladesh Friendship Society. On the 2nd of December, that was a Sunday, 1973, the Sunday Times Color magazine, as it was known at the time, the Sunday Times Color magazine, 1973, the 48 years ago. Color was a new addition to publications. And the article that the Sunday Times Color magazine contained on that date, 2nd of December 1973, is this one. KHOODEELAAR. Now, KHOODEELAAR is a Siloti word, the Siloti language word that I have applied as a positive statement of action. KHOODEELAAR television channel is part of the KHOODEELAAR campaign in defense of the community. Now, this is the word the Sunday Times had on the front page, not the back of the magazine. Sunday Times color magazine, the back of the magazine had this article. This is the article, "The World Beyond the Curtains." So that was the Sunday Times color magazine on the Sunday, the 2nd of December 1973. Now, I had a maternal uncle who was younger than me, but was very close to me in terms of social actions that the two of us did when we were in the village, before he left the village for London, and I then later joined him. So it was New Road, London E1, 1HE, where he would come, and I'll use his name, the kind of family name, not the formal name, because the family name would be easily recognizable. That's the article. And his name was Mona, M-O-N-A, Mona. And the Mona is a kind of single name that is common among the subcontinent and in the Arabian kind of countries, and in Persia as well. So he would bring the Sunday newspapers for me from the shop in Commercial Road, just next to Hazel Street, now where there is a kind of eating place now. Used to have the convenience shop and newsagents owned by a Jewish man who is, of course, passed away. And his shop was later bought by many people until it was bought by the current owner, who is a Pakistani person. And the Pakistani person immediately scrapped the newsagents and made it a restaurant of sorts. And it is between the Hazel Street and Cannon Street Road. And my kind of maternal kind of relation, Mona, he used to live in Kinder Street, which has been now kind of scrapped, that street, which is off the Cannon Street Road on the one hand, and the Rampart Street on the other. At the end of the Rampart Street, on the one side, which is facing the Rampart Street, the Kinder Street, Kinder. Kinder Street faced the Rampart Street, and Kinder Street then went on to join the Cannon Street Road. So my uncle Mona used to get up on the Sunday very early, and he would go to the shop in the Commercial Road owned by the Jewish man, and he would buy all the newspapers, Sunday newspapers. So if the Sunday newspapers now cost, let's say, 18, 19, 20 pounds, it would cost about half, I think, or just under half of that in 1973, in December 1973. So he came with the papers, the Sunday papers. The idea was that we would read the newspapers and have the breakfast. And on that Sunday, the 2nd of December 1973, we were in the middle of reading the newspapers and having the breakfast. And he was kind of waiting for me to tell him the bits that I would think he would find interesting in terms of the community, in terms of the society, the world, etc. And I was reading the Sunday Times magazine. And towards the end of the magazine, I came across this. This is the one. This is 48 years old. This is I have been carrying this for 48 years. And this was a piece that was not a random piece. It was not a kind of anthropological reference to a particular part of the East End of London. It was an intentional anti-Siloti, anti-Muslim piece written about or against the people of Bangladesh coming from Silot and living in the Brick Lane area. 48 years on, this article is still there and it is absolutely unmistakable as an intentionally written piece to demonize and distort the identity of the Siloti people. Now, Silot, of course, is not part of Bengal, but it was part of Assam until 1947. So there was a referendum held just before the 1947, August 1947, deciding as to where Silot would be as the formal British colonial occupation ended, or was due to end in August 1947. So to put it briefly, the people of Silot in the referendum voted the majority in the number, the majority of the people in Silot. Just a short majority, not a huge majority, Silot people opted to remain part of a Muslim majority area, which soon became East Pakistan because of the religion. And the rest of Silot remained in Assam, which is still there in India, India's province of Assam. Now, the Siloti people for the duration of the period of Silot as part of Assam, or politically led the politics of the province of Assam. So the Silotis were leaders, political leaders. I know that because one of the uncles of Uncle Mona was a direct kind of participant in the politics of Assam. His name was Arman Ali Chaudhry. Arman Ali Chaudhry was directly engaged in the politics of the what then was the Muslim League, and the Muslims more Muslim than Muslim League, if you like. And Arman Ali was active against the British, along with Zakir Hussain, Dr. Zakir Hussain, who later became a leader of the Indian state, Indian Republic. So I saw pictures of Arman Ali Chaudhry with Dr. Zakir Hussain and others in our village. And Arman Ali explained how he was kind of returning from this place or that place, etc., etc. This was happening before the August 47. The pictures and the recounting. So the leading political and social activists in the then Assam included my family members, if you like Arman Ali Chaudhry. So for me to read the Sunday Times, The World Beyond the Curtains article, saying that the Silatis are socially and politically backward, personally, it came as a complete, absolutely unbelievable shock, because my family had members very prominently active in the politics of Assam. And not far from our village was the village of Badeshwar, where a number of prominent activists, political activists, came from. Assam political activists came from Badeshwar. And our village was Chandrapur, and there was not very far from one another. So when in December 1973 in London, I read this piece, The World Beyond the Curtains, and then it began denouncing the Silotis and understating the Silotis. I mean, this had to be refuted, and I had no plan until then of doing any kind of political organizing in the way that I had to in December 1973. Arman Ali Chaudhry was not only a political activist of the highest kind of level, but he was also a scholar and a leading scholar in Sylhet, because he was the teacher in the Sylhet government school. I mean, our family had kind of dozens of people in various positions, but this one, in the context of the Sunday Times article, I had to focus on this one, for example, in my reassessment of my own backgrounds and my origins. Arman Ali Chaudhry was the only Muslim in the whole of Assam, if not beyond Assam, who was a scholar in Hindu, in the languages, say Hindi and Sanskrit especially. And he was the teacher, main teacher of Sanskrit and linguistics and languages at the Sylhet government school. And no other Muslim held that position, as far as you know. Of course, we had other members of the family who had postings and positions in the states in other disciplines, but this one was about languages and linguistics and general scholarship and social kind of teachings. Arman Ali himself was a spiritualist as well, apart from being a kind of modern contemporary scholar. And in that spirituality, he actually resembled, not to the extent that the original, my great grandfather was Shah Abdul Ali, who was a spiritual leader and a scholar and traveled. I mean, at the end of the 18th century, he was traveling on foot from our place in Silot all the way to Central Asian countries. And he was a scholar of the kind that haven't actually been seen since his passing. And so Arman Ali Chaudhry followed my great grandfather in spiritual activities, and they were very popular in terms of people seeking their advice and so on. So when I read the Silet or anti-Siloti denunciation piece in the Sunday Times in London, I had to do something to refute the lies and the defamations and slanders and untruths and the hatred against the Silotis for personal family linked reasons as well as objective reasons. But the agenda of which that article was a part was to deny the Siloti speaking people in the UK generally and the Siloti speaking people generally any credit for the role they had played in 1971. It actually said that non-Siloti people, Bengalis from other parts of the UK, had to come to the Brick Lane area and to persuade the Silotis to help or support the cause of the Bangladesh independence in 1971. Absolutely untrue. It was the Siloti speaking people that led the campaign for the Bangladesh independence movement. How do I know? Because my own father was a leading organizer of the campaign based in the UK and based in the area, and my father was living in New Road. And he organized literally hundreds of people in many ways, every respect that was necessary. So the Sunday Times piece was actually intended to attack the Siloti speaking people in the UK and to deny the Siloti speaking people's absolutely unique, unparalleled contribution to the international cause for raising awareness and therefore support for the independence of Bangladesh from the united kind of existence called Pakistan. And as I said before, not this morning, but my encounter or my engagement or my kind of controversial kind of confrontation, let's say, evidential, intellectual, ethical, moral, and factual, my confrontation with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the 1960s in Dhaka was unique and remains unique because I am the one who actually confronted Zulfikar Ali Bhutto years before 1971, and I defeated him in the debate. Nobody else has ever anywhere confronted or faced Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, let alone defeat Zulfikar Ali Bhutto anywhere. And because of my own kind of lack of selfishness, if you like, I have not been emphasizing this event that took place in Dhaka in the 1960s. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was, and his entry on the, wiki entry, etc., etc. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto is praised as one of the more intelligent kind of politicians of his generation. And he was formally educated, and he was an academic, University of Southampton, where he was a lecturer in law. Well, he faced me after he returned to Pakistan and was a member of the cabinet of Zulfikar, Field Marshal Ayub Khan, who had appointed him foreign minister. And Bhutto was sacked by Ayub Khan. Not long after his being sacked by Ayub Khan, Zulfikar Bhutto arrived in East Pakistan in Dhaka as part of his campaign to set up a popular movement that would challenge Ayub Khan. And Zulfikar Bhutto was by all means, by all accounts, very charismatic, and his personality was very attractive to the most of the political people. So that is what he capitalized on. And he arrived in Dhaka and he stationed himself at the Intercontinental Hotel, which was not far from the Institute of Engineers, which is not far from the complex which houses the various courts, Supreme Court, etc., in Bangladesh now. So at the meeting, Zulfikar Bhutto was basing his appearance at the rally, at the gathering at the Institute of Engineers. I would say several thousand, but it is not possible to count precisely because I cannot produce a picture there in front of. But the place was packed. And most of the people were, let's say generously, under 40 years. Most of them under 30 years. And the idea behind Bhutto's appearance there, that was his, let's say, launch appearance. And Bhutto appeared with the assumption that he would give a speech and he would be given a rousing reception, and that he would then automatically convert the representative sample of the potential recruits to his movement. And that was his plan. So he gave a speech. Now, I didn't belong to any political party as a member. I did have sympathies politically, but the political sympathies were less important to me, and they remain so, than the political principles, the values. And I have given up more in the last decades than I have, if you like, taken in terms of opportunities and careers, because I believe in the principle of seeking the truth and telling the truth. That actually is costly, and it remains costly for me. And all those years ago, when I went there to hear Bhutto, I didn't go there with any other purpose than to hear him objectively hear him and objectively listen to what he had to say or what he was going to say. And I didn't have any prejudice against him. I still don't have any prejudice against him after all these years, because what I was focusing on was to see his kind of perception, his understanding, his capacity to substantiate the suggestion which underlay his appearance there as the leader of this new movement against martial law administrator Ayub Khan. So I was there with absolutely open mind, and I'm speaking with absolutely objective open minds after all these decades. So what did I do? I was listening, and he didn't speak for very long. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto spoke for, I would think, between 15-20 minutes. And what I found, the overwhelming thing that I found in his speech as he had delivered, was inconsistency and unsubstantiated, undemonstrated assertion that there had been mistakes by those who opposed the British Empire. Now, it's a very broad kind of statement. Of course, there would have been mistakes, and there were mistakes. But were he kind of referring to the mistakes by suggesting that leaders like Subhash Bose had got it right? He didn't make it clear. He didn't mention Subhash Bose. But what he said was general statement. And I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting him. He said that there had been mistakes. And then he kind of proceeded irrationally, because he had not named, he had not substantiated the mistakes. So he proceeded to the suggestion that he was kind of representative of the position that would amount to compensation for those mistakes. Words to the effect, I'm paraphrasing. So my question to him, the first question to him in a paraphrase, was to ask him to explain, substantiate what he meant by the mistakes. Zulfikar Bhutto failed to answer me. So in that vein, I asked him another question, because each question was treated by Zulfikar Bhutto in the same way as he had done the first one. So what happened was that I kept asking him questions. And after I asked him the 9th question, I think he got the message, and he concluded that he could not face me. And if he could not face me, he could not proceed to the next, theoretically, next phase of the meeting. But by that time, by the 9th question I had asked him, he looked as if he had an extra flow of blood on his face, on his mouth and face. He looked distinctly red with something, anger, frustration, whatever. And immediately he did a right turn as I remember. And he left the meeting very fast. It's astonishing and remarkable that none of the other people present followed my question, and none of the people, after Bhutto left the meeting, came to me and engaged in a continuation follow-up conversation. And it has been more than 50 years, isn't it? Very more than 50 years since I asked Zulfikar Bhutto 9 questions, and Zulfikar Bhutto failed to answer any of the questions, and he decided that my questions were too much. He left. Now, as we know, what he did afterwards, that is in years after that event, Zulfikar Bhutto was not politically what he did afterwards, not what he did at the Engineers Institute in Dhaka in relation to me. Zulfikar Bhutto in the West Pakistan became only electable because there was no alternative, there was no other political kind of movement or party that the people could, in the majority, kind of support in the circumstances. And then when he became installed, incumbent in the post, political post of prime minister, president, whatever, Zulfikar Bhutto himself made serial mistakes, political mistakes. And in addition to making political mistakes, he actually gave too much away about his personal vanity, his personal arrogance. I mean, I became very clear when he left the Institute of Engineers in Dhaka that this man is not fit for the political kind of crown or office that he's here to seek. He was not interested in engaging in exchange with me. He could have asked me why I was asking him the questions, and I would have given him the answer quite clearly. But he didn't. Now that was a Siloti. I'm a Siloti. And I was confronting a Sindhi man from Sindh. Now, if Bhutto had survived, I mean, Ziaul Haq's kind of regime, etc., etc., and if theoretically Bhutto were to visit the UK and meet me like Altaf Gahor did meet me, would he have behaved in the same way as Altaf Gahor behaved towards me when I asked him questions and when I reminded? Because my political approach is asking questions, getting evidence. Because Altaf Gahor completely lost his head in his mind. I mean, Bhutto didn't explode in the way that years later Altaf Gahor exploded against me because he couldn't answer my questions at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London. Why do these people do that? Why do they explode in frustration when asked questions by Muhammad? So here we are talking about, I mean, if the people of Brick Lane or people of East London that the Sunday Times article attacked contained somebody like me. Now, how do they manage to say that this is a backward community? On the evidence, my records stand as having deflated Zulfikar Bhutto, the most, well, at the time, that is in the 60s, he was praised as the smartest politician in Pakistan. So I deflated him in Dhaka. I deflated him without throwing a stone at him. I deflated Zulfikar Bhutto without taking resort to any violence whatsoever. If I could do that, and if I came from Silot, how did the Sunday Times article manage to portray the Silotis as backward, illiterate, uncultured, and eating banana plants? So that's why I and my uncle Mona, we decided to mount the campaign, and I remember seeking the support of some others. But the support of the others that I did get was done with great difficulty. Anything to do with the moral height of an argument, and it dates back the events, the debate, and the equation, the lack of equation, if you like, go all the way thousands of years back to Aristotle, Plato, and others. But it's not a pleasant experience to have to deal with people, your contemporaries, behaving like the opponents of Aristotle and Plato and others. So what happened with the articles that I had to translate into the language of the people that had been demonized was that every day, almost every day, about every aspect of it, I had to argue with these people to emphasize the importance of the need to oppose and condemn and reject and refute the Sunday Times article attacking the Silotis, attacking the Muslims, attacking the Bangladeshis. And I think that December, 48 years ago, began something in terms of the internal dynamics of the community that is still continuing. The individuals have changed because many have passed away, but the actual obstruction by ignorance, by lack of education, lack of studying, continues. So today, 48 years after the 2nd of December 1973, today is the 2nd of December 2021, the arguments that the Sunday Times falsely made against the Silotis, similar arguments are being made, perpetrated, and I'm the one who is continuing to refute them and note them and oppose them. No one else is doing it. 48 years on. In between the Sunday Times publication of the 2nd of December 1973 to now, of course, many similar actions have to be organized. One of the most significant actions, but not the only significant actions, has of course been the KHOODEELAAR campaign that was conceived 20 years after the December 1973. So it was 20 years, which is 2003. well, 20 years plus, let's say. It's not 20 years, but 20 years would be 73, 83, 93, but it was 2003, so 26 years later. The KHOODEELAAR campaign had to defend Brick Lane physically, which is what we did with the Silat, Bangladesh Friendship Society, which I had to found in December 1973 with my uncle Mona and reluctant participants. Now that has been, the 48 years have been the only continuous movement, if you like, in terms of defending the community, defending the Silotis, defending the Bangladeshis. There is no other campaign, let alone movement, that is comparable to this, being organized by anyone. What there have been, and the beneficiaries may think that they have been too crafty and clever. They haven't been. There have been parasite outfits. Parasites have taken advantage of the fruits of the campaign, the movement for the defense of the community started in December 1973 in this context. We had other campaigns that had been ongoing for a decade before that, but this one. So the identity of the community, combining anthropology, ethnicity, religion, background, etc., etc. The identity, the long range identity and defense of the identity of the community has been kind of grabbed at. Parts of the identity, parts of the results and the outcome and the products of the campaigns that I have been maintaining have been kind of pocketed by parasites. Parasites who have become couriers. They've become councillors and they have become members of parliament or candidates. They won't recognize it because they don't recognize the community even after grabbing hold of the posts. So they don't know. They are in posts, but they are completely without any awareness of what posts they are in. When the then Inner London Education Authority in the mid-1980s set out to merge the Marlbury Girls' School by phases. Nobody exists in the community even now from 1980s up to now who can say that they did the campaign that I organized and I carried out successfully. That school would have vanished. That school, if they had merged it into a mixed sex school, would have disappeared. But I did the organizing and I did the footwork and protected the school so that it could become, and it did become, in terms of the conventional criteria, the most successful school in London, or one of the most successful girls' school in all of the UK. If I had not protected the school's status and constitution, there would be no question of success. So significant has the achievement or performance in conventional terms of the Marlborough School has been that whoever the First Lady of the USA was told about this school, and she made, the First Lady, Michelle Obama, made 2 visits to London. And one of the visits, main visits, was to the Marlborough School. Now compare that work, keeping the school and making it the platform for the conventional success, to the point that its existence has been not only noticed but has been positively noticed by the First Lady in the USA, who physically visited the place. And she praised it, and she made her commendations. So I did this. When I did that, did I get the support of the, quote, leaders? Well, they were leaders. They were not yet leaders as councillors, but they were preparing to become leaders, the contenders for the councillor posts. Not only did they not support me, but they actually acted as prostitutes. They got bribed by the leaders of the Inner London Education Authority. And they went around, these prostitutes, saying to people, parents, that I was about to visit or I had already visited, for the purpose of collecting signatures against the proposed alteration of the structure and the nature of the school. So these prostitutes were paid £25,000, according to my reports, 2 prostitutes who both became councillors later. But they were paid £25,000 to go around the community in Tower Hamlets and to say bad things about me. Not because I had actually done any bad things, but to invent vague bad things. They did do that. So what happened? The result was they failed because I had already successfully collected the minimum number of signatures of the parents, who spontaneously, based on my kind of explaining to them what the implications were, they actually supported the petition, and the petitioner duly submitted in 1987 to the then UK Department for Education, which was at that time in the Margaret Thatcher cabinet. Nothing to do with Margaret Thatcher. We just gave it formally. The petition submitted to the Department for Education, which was fronted by Kenneth Clarke. Again, we had nothing to do with Kenneth Clarke's personal politics or Thatcher's personal politics. This was a local school, and the local parents were mobilized by me, and we submitted the petition, and the Secretary of State formally accepted the parents' objection to the proposal by the Inner London Education Authority. So the Marlborough School remained a single-sex girls' school, and it remains one now, and it is still one of the conventionally defined high-achieving schools in all of London. So this is me, the same person that had actually engaged or questioned put 9 questions to Zulfikar Bhutto in the 1960s. So I was doing the 60s, 70s, 80s. So the second or third calendar decade, let's say. So I was continuing. So I continued the same set of universal values based actions when I organized the defense of the community against racist attacks, both in 78 and in 1993, 94. One was about the racists nearly murdering a teenager in the commercial road. And a few months later, in demanding justice for the 11-year-old child called Nasima Begum against the London ambulance service failures and the Royal London Hospital. So these are some of the activities that took place successfully, because in the case of Nasima Begum's being neglected by the London ambulance service and the Royal London Hospital, two things happened. One was the then Secretary of State in the name of health, Virginia Bottomley, was shifted from that department as a result of the pressure. And the second is that there was a incomplete inquiry into the behavior of the London ambulance service, but it did vindicate our campaign. So this was all happening in Tower Hamlets, with me organizing against state, local state, regional state, state actions, and getting vindicated and succeeding. And the next one came in the big kind of size of the campaign, was the campaign against the government over the Crossrail hole they were plotting to dig in Brick Lane. Remember? In 73, in December 73, the Sunday Times had already dug a hole in Brick Lane against the reputation of Brick Lane, against the identity of Brick Lane, against the honesty and integrity of Brick Lane and the area adjacent to Brick Lane. So it was targeting by the state, targeting by the media, the same community. So all the benefits that the self-serving couriers, parasites, claiming to be seeking careers in the name of the local community, all the parasites, let's say in the last 48 years, they've got their careers. But what have they got to produce as defending the community? And the community needs to be defended even more than it has been so far, because internally, within the community, there are many injustices that are taking place. One of the main injustices that goes unmentioned is the sexual abuse of children, mainly girls, not exclusively girls, but mainly girls being abused by members of the family or within the family settings in the community. Grave injustice being done to these girls. And this is something that there is an absolute silence about. Well, I'm not silent, but in terms of effecting change, I would not get the signatures from these people. Because every single innocent supporter signing a campaign petition against the sexual abuse of children in the community will have a same number doing the opposite. So we shall be talking more about all of those. Now I go back to the date. The Sunday Times published The World Beyond the Curtains article on Sunday, the 2nd of December, 1973. And nobody was there. Not a single member of the community, apart from my uncle Mona, wanted to kind of seriously campaign against this attack. There were some transitional kind of adults supporting, but not permanently. And the fact that there has been no publication about the fact, let alone the impact, let alone the implication of the Sunday Times article making all these false claims against the Silotis in particular, there is none except by our campaign and by me in the last 48 hours, 48 years. 48 years from 1973, December, to now, December 2nd, December 2001. So let's look at the entry on the results in the internet about who is talking about the Sunday Times attack on the Silotis in Brick Lane. So the only entry that is made by the parasites is following the entry So the only online piece about the Siletis, other than by me, is by this person called Greg Smith. And it says the struggle of Sileti people. Now this one is based much later than the Sunday Times article, but here is an acknowledgement by Greg Smith in his The Struggle of Sileti Speakers. He gives a reluctant recognition to me, whereas he should not be so reluctant. But the reason he is reluctant is because of his racism, although he is acknowledging this. We'll talk about that Greg Smith in due course later. He says Muhammad Haque in particular played a key role in articulating a radical challenge to traditional standards of thinking. Now, he is lying there because I did not just do what he's saying I did. But I actually introduced him to Siloti. And I spent several months of unique tutoring about Siloti and the context and the history and everything. And his acknowledgement is completely untruthful because he's mentioning certain individuals. That is saying the 1980s, mid-1980s, that would not even now know what he's talking about and what they were being given credit for. Because the Sileti language is not just a language, of course, it's history and tradition, literature, all the rest of it. Hundreds of years apart from the supposed mother language, which is supposed to be Bengali. Nothing could be further from the truth. Sileti has got independent identity, and that is one of the reasons why the independence identity of Sileti is one of the reasons why somebody made the decision, whoever that was, to mount the attack via the Sunday Times article in December 1973. In that article, they claimed that Siloti people ate banana. That was supposed to be painting a community that came in the cultural, racist, pejorative use, came from the jungles. Sylhet, both the part in Assam in India and Sylhet in Bangladesh, as compared in terms of society, in terms of culture, etc., the ordinary Silotis compare far better than they have been painted there. Now, I have no intention to derogate or use derogatory kind of remarks about people from Bengal. But the difference between the people of Bengal and the people of Sylhet are quite remarkable. Ordinary people. For example, during a few months that I stayed in West Bengal, I visited a village in the 24 Parganas in West Bengal, an area called Barasat. Over a few weeks. And the perception about life, about things that I witnessed among the people there, again, I'm not saying this to kind of understate the people there. And mainly the people there were at that time economically kind of challenged, if you like, financially challenged, etc. But their familiarity with things that, as compared to the familiarity with things in the village, my village, back in Sylhet, was absolutely remarkably different. Yet if anyone believes the description of Sylhetis as contained in the World Beyond the Curtains in the Sunday Times of 2nd of December 1973, anyone believes any of that would think that the people of the village in the Barasat area would have been kind of describable as, let's say, at a level which is comparatively higher than the people in Sylhet that I come from, the Sylhet village or villages. That's not the case. And Barasat is not far from Calcutta itself. Not very far from Calcutta. It is a bit away from Calcutta itself, but not very much. So why they decided to paint the people in Brick Lane as being Sylhetis and being Muslims, and also, astonishingly, they said that the people of Sylhet or Sylheti origin people in Brick Lane area didn't support the Bangladesh independence cause in 1971. Why did they do that? Because the fact is that during the 9 months of 1971, in the UK, the main people mobilizing support for the cause of Bangladesh were Sylhetis. So whose interest was it that they wanted to serve by casting the Sylhetis in particular as being even unaware of the Bangladesh independence movement going on during 1971, and that the Sylhetis in Brick Lane only became aware after being approached by Bengalis, non-Sylhetis. I mean, who invented that and why? Because it is plainly false, very seriously false, because even now, 48 years later, nearly 50 years, well, it will be 50 years, few weeks, 1971 to 2021, 50 years since Bangladesh. Why did anybody think that demonizing and denying and misrepresenting the role of the Sylhetis over the 71 Bangladesh movement was going to help anyone? Who was it supposed to help? I mean, one of the beneficiaries from such a lying propaganda would be, of course, the people who wanted to create disunity among Bangladeshis generally. Why would they do that? And the disunity was not aimed on the evidence of the contents of the lies that were contained in the Sunday Times article. This disunity among the Bangladeshis was not going to cause or contribute any beneficial image to India or to Pakistan. It is creating disunity between Bangladeshi Bengalis and Bangladeshi Silotis. Which is why I founded in December 1973 the Sylhet Bangladesh Friendship Society, so that nobody could take advantage of the hatred spread through the Sunday Times and incite any violence or any conflict between Silotis and non-Silotis in Britain. And the theme remains absolutely at the center of the work that I've been doing for 48 years in this context. Now, as all records go, the fact that there was a racist attack in 1970. There was a racist attack in 1970 in Stepney, where a Siloti speaking restaurant worker who was returning home from work in a restaurant was stabbed in Stepney. And he died. The evidence is, the fact is, the record is that the majority of the parasites, Bengali speaking parasites, who have fed off the Siloti community, remain on the same kind of relationship whereby they prefer the ordinary, unschooled, illiterate, subliterate among the Silotis, so that they can exploit them and they can kind of pretend to be helping them. So these are the criminals that are among the beneficiaries of the kind of idea, of the emergence of the idea or the image or the caricature that the Silotis are not as dedicated Bangladeshis as the non-Siloti Bengalis. Now, in the last 48 years, let's say, since the Sunday Times article, there have been quite a few Bengali-speaking non-Silotis appearing in Tower Hamlets and seeking employment and seeking positions that are meant for Bangladeshis, various subsidiary positions. But not one of them, not a single one of them in the last 48 years, it's not a short period, has raised or acknowledged any reference to the Sunday Times article. So we shall be talking more about this month, and we shall challenge anyone who disagrees with the evidential update and analysis to come forward with evidence, clear evidence as to where anyone did raise the significance and the record and the fact of the Sunday Times magazine attacking the celebrities of Brick Lane, the Muslims of Brick Lane, at all. So when the Crossrail attack was formulated in the late 1990s, before it was given a kind of skeletal structure during the 2001, 2002, 2003, we began the campaign to reject the Crossrail whole plot and to defend the community in Brick Lane and adjacent areas. By defending the community, we defended, and we have been defending, and we are defending everyone who comes from Bangladesh and is affected by any anti-Bangladeshi narrative. So we defend the homes, we defend the right to work, we defend the right to housing, we defend the right to schooling, we defend the right to welfare benefits, and the right to exercise the common freedom that is available to the other people in the wider UK society. It's our campaign. For example, the most recent attack on the Bangladeshi linked part of the East End, based in Brick Lane, is of course the Truman Brewery's attack. Now, the fact that this attack has been officially kind of criticized, allegedly by supporters of the ordinary community, doesn't equal anything like succeeding in stopping the Truman Brewery assault. And that's the difference between the work that the KHOODEELAAR campaign has been doing and does, and the other campaigns that I have outlined, that I have been mobilizing and organizing. You make a token noise, but you don't stop the attack. See the difference? The KHOODEELAAR campaign made the noise and stopped the attack. Now, what's the difference? Why did the KHOODEELAAR campaign succeed and these others claiming to be campaigning against the Truman Brewery, they are not succeeding? What is missing? And what is missing is the authenticity, the originality, and the truthfulness. There are quite a few parasites operating in Brick Lane in the name of the community. These parasites include some of the parasites that actually had taken the side of the Sunday Times article attacking us. Because in 1973, when we mobilized the attack against the attack of the Sunday Times, some criminals, they are biologically Silotis or Siloti origin, but they have been brainwashed. They're mental slaves and worse. These mental slaves and worse still around. Quite a few of them are still around, 48 years on. And these criminals actually have no basis, no fact on which to stand any actual truthful criticism of any of our actions against the Sunday Times peace or against the unnamed elements that actually must have been involved in the Sunday Times attack. So these parasites have got pernicious, evil kind of motives for undermining the campaign against the Sunday Times that we mounted in 1973. And these criminals have actually never produced a single piece of campaign in defense of the community in the last 48 years. They have done is to produce single parasitical pretension supporting the little career, the little income. We have not sought any income from anybody, and we never would seek any income from anybody when we are doing the campaign for defending the community. Now that is the difference between us and them. They are the mental slaves and they are the mental parasites that actually seek to benefit personally from the work. So here, going back to Greg Smith, Smith lies and says that Muhammad Haque in particular played a key role in articulating a radical challenge to traditional standards of thinking. Over a period of many months, we spent many hours together discussing the background to and implications of the case study. Now, that idiot was a student, and I was tutoring him. Nowhere else would you find a tutor being equated to the student, and the tuition and the tutorial being converted into a discussion. It was not so. And what Greg Smith has written in this piece, based on my inspiration, let's say, but distorted by his racism and stupidity, doesn't complete the picture about Thomas Babington Macaulay, language, linguistics, and the role of language and linguistics as applied by Thomas Babington Macaulay. And Greg Smith cannot understand the difference between Dhaka and Kolkata. There is no way that Kolkata is the same as Dhaka. There is almost 1,000 years difference between Dhaka and Kolkata. They can be compared in terms of various common grounds between the two main language groups. The Bengali that is based in Kolkata, culturally and socially, is not the same Bengali based in Dhaka. And therefore, the Bengali origin that the racists wrongly attach Silati with is 1,000 years different. There is this complexity in Macaulay's reference to Arabic and Urdu and Sanskrit and Hindi. I mean, Macaulay is, of course, Macaulay starts from the contemptuous position that English is the natural language of the world. It is not. And Macaulay also pervertedly suggests that all the other languages in the world that have existed long before English as we know it or as he knew it came into existence at all, are longer running than English has been or English will be. And there is no intrinsic, particular, unique quality as a language that English, as Macaulay saw it or kind of understood it, as compared to the other languages of the world. So all of these factors I went through in my tutoring of Greg Smith. But Greg Smith obviously has made himself kind of the CV, the point that he made academically, because he was doing the study of the languages under other races at the Institute of Education at the University of London. While I was tutoring him from outside, I was not doing that from a post in the Institute of Education in the University of London. Now, what Greg Smith has done there about the struggle of the Sylheti people is that he has taken the kind of emotional heading, but left out the substance. So we shall be talking about that more. And what the Sunday Times article did was, of course, 100 times worse than the errors and mistakes of the piece by Greg Smith. So when the Mulberry School for girls is kind of audited, this is there is an incalculable kind of phenomenon there. Most of the girls that go to the Mulberry School and have gone to the Mulberry School since the 1970s, let's say, these girls are mainly from the Sylheti speaking families. And if you ask them, those that have actually gone through the schooling at Mulberry School and got the quote good results and got jobs, etc., etc., if you ask them, if you kind of select them randomly or choose them randomly and ask them about the school, they won't be able to tell you, because they've been mentally brainwashed. They've been given the facility to get quote conventional results, etc., etc., but they have not been given the knowledge about society, about the community they come from. So, for example, they've got teachers in that school, Mulberry School, teachers from various backgrounds, including quite a few from Indian background, Bangladeshi. I don't know about Pakistani, but there could be. I don't know at this stage because I have no direct connection with the school's administration management now. But when I was doing the campaign to defend the school from the kind of conversion that was being attempted by the Inner London Education Authority, I was just out of the Inner London Education at that time, because the Inner London Education Authority effectively had actually been ceasing as an organization because of the other plan to scrap the Greater London Assembly, of which the Inner London Education Authority was a constitutional part. But when the campaign against the ILE's proposal was ongoing, I had a couple of meetings with the racist woman who was the head teacher of the Mulberry School. And she was racist, she was ungracious, ungrateful, totally in kind of lacking in gratitude. Because if I hadn't organized and mobilized the parents opposing the proposal, then the school had been lost. And no amount of money, absolutely no amount of money, if somebody was paid to protect the school, no amount of money would be able to stop it. Even if there were £1 million invested in stopping the proposal, they wouldn't be able to. So my work, as always, was doing priceless things for the community. And we shall be going into the updating of the campaign 48 years on, and we shall be lodging a specific new campaign against the Sunday Times. So we shall be coming back on the Sunday Times later. Now moving on to the issue of K Starmer. Let's check what the private lie is saying about K Starmer. If you look at the contents, of the kind of online streaming versions, so-called television outlets operated by people that claim to be connected with the Bangladeshi community or are of Bangladeshi origins, you will find no reference to the Sunday Times article. You'll find no reference to the campaign to keep the Mulberry School single sex. And you will not find any reference to the campaign against racist attack that actually focuses on racist attack, either about Tosir Ali or about Altaf Ali or about Ishaq Ali. And most certainly you will not find any reference to the murder by Bangladeshi criminals of this popular Langdon Park school boy called Ajmal Ahmed. Everything that our campaign does is therefore the only thing of its kind. And it's, you go back 48 years and beyond. And it is the only thread defending the community that exists. So anyone else who is saying that they're doing something for the same community, they are not doing that. They are acting as parasites and they're making up things and they're making claims and they don't even know what they are kind of inventing as their contribution, because they don't get the facts and they don't have the facts and they don't understand the facts and they don't understand the community. When faced with the racists, these parasites completely change their kind of language and their vocabulary. So what they have been doing in these so-called media outlets are churning out emptiness after emptiness after emptiness. So we shall be talking about those case by case in due course. Now, going back to the council, the Hrs council, that is supposed to be an elected council, what do you find? As we said in the last kind of few weeks as an update, there have been Bangladeshi origin councillors imposed in the London Borough of Hrs Council. In order to find out what they've been doing, if they've been doing anything at all, the simplest way to start is to ask them to produce evidence of what they have been doing. For example, have they been doing anything against racism in the council? If they have been, where have they been doing it? The opposing, that is. How have they been doing it? The opposing of racism, that is. We want them to produce publicly written documentary evidence of contemporaneous kind of activities by them in relation to each and every racist action. Let them publish them. Did they have meetings? And if they have meetings, what were the proceedings in the meetings? We can help them by saying that they have never, ever been opposed to racism, these parasites. How do we know that? Because there has been no mention of a single councillor risking, let alone actually losing, risking their career because they took on the racist leadership of the Labour Party. There is no record. So similarly, when Sylvie Bermann was murdered 20 years ago, let's say, in London E3, Bow Island area, three criminals were jailed connected with his murder. And one of the convicted criminals, convicted of the murder, was not convicted of murder but convicted of manslaughter. Now let's say this to those who don't necessarily have the same depth of knowledge that they need to do in order to understand the difference. Manslaughter is a disguise. It is murder, but it's a disguise to kind of hide the intensity of the labeling that goes with murder. But it's the same killing of the person. And it's a disguise because it allows the murderer to pretend that they didn't have the mental kind of attitude or intent to murder the victim. That's the difference. It is the difference about the supposed intention on the murderer. It's not the difference between the death. There is no difference because the person has been murdered, has been killed. There is no difference in that fact. The only difference is in the pretense that the murderer, ex-murderer, didn't intend to murder, while Y-murderer did intend to murder. There's a very superficial kind of description, and this is to do with the imperfect nature of the English criminal law. It's not based on evidence. English criminal law is not based on evidence. Repeat, it's not based on evidence. It's based on supposition. It's based on prejudice. It's based on presumption. It's not based on evidence. Think about that. Anyone who says that Devlin, who was the murderer, called the manslaughterer, didn't murder Sylvie Bermann because Devlin claims that his intention was different. If his intention was to kill Sylvie Bermann, then what difference does it make whether he intended to kill him or intended to cause him such grievous bodily harm that would lead to Sylvie Bermann being killed? So when it became known, somebody who let on that Ian Devlin was working there, somebody who did that obviously didn't want a real campaign to develop. because the piece by Ted Jury that was published in the online version of the Independent in June 2016 about Ian Devlin working, that wasn't followed by the necessary amount of substantial kind of criticism of the Tower Council, let alone any action being taken by the campaigners against the racist head teacher at the Ian McCarter School, where Devlin was given the job. There are a lot of incidents, if you like, of various Labour Party connected individuals being involved in contradictory utterances about the murderer and killer of Sylvie Bermann. So, again, none of the people that took a real part in any aspect of a campaign against the murder of Sylvie Bermann has been a Bengali. Think about that. And it goes on. When the then kind of the former deputy leader of the GLC, John McDonnell, is seen or heard or is reported as issuing an endorsement about Diane Abbott, first thing that has to be remembered is that he is not a black person. He's not an Asian person. He's not a person who can be in any way described as being opposed to racism because of his own ethnicity or because of his own race. And yet, it's Diane Abbott who is being certified by John McDonnell in the New European, which is racistly edited and racistly written and racistly produced so-called pro-European publication. When John McDonnell is quoted in similar way, endorsing Afsana Begum, who is in the next door kind of parliamentary constituency almost, to Diana Abbot's Hackney, questions must be asked. I mean, what kind of expertise does John McDonnell possess, and based on what evidence that he can be cited as endorsing the personality, the character of Afsana Begum and Diane Abbott. Afsana Begum was born years after the GLC was scrapped. So, where did John McDonnell meet Afsana Begum? And what opportunities did the others in the whole of the community in Tower Hamlets not have that Afsana Begum had of meeting John MacDonald so exclusively? What qualifications does he have to acquire access of the kind that he must have had if a single word of him in endorsing Afsana Begum is to be treated as true and truthful? As we have said on the facts, apart from the fact that Diana Abbott, quote, married a really African man called Thompson and, quote, had a child by that person, or had a black child, if you like. Apart from that, in the last 30 years, 32, 31 years, 32 years, there has been no public, there is absolutely no public evidence or published record or publicly accessible record of Diane Abbott either relating to the black community in any shape or relying on the black community's work for anything political that she has actually benefited from or has supported. All the sources around Diane Abbott increasingly, undeniably appear to be white. I mean, we have no objection to her having white connections. That's not the point. The point is factual. If she is being portrayed as a black person or as a representative of the black community, is it too much to ask that she would have black affiliations and black sources? About her politics or political stance, in addition to her readily available white kind of associates and associations with the whites. Why would anyone in their right minds accept the proposition that a woman who was paraded as the black section shirt wearer has as her closest kind of co-appearee on the BBC, Andrew Neil show, one of the notorious racists, one of the most notorious racists and right-wingers of the conservative ilk, Michael Portillo. So you have in the UK Parliament a mixture of people in the two main parties that appear to be of African descent and Asian descent, including one looking at the Conservatives, the three cabinet post holders that are Asian, and Quasi Quatran is of African. And what do you make of Nadim Zahawi? Is he Asian, is he African, or is he non-existent in terms of background? What about Sajid Javid, who has denounced being a son of a Muslim, and he has denounced being a Muslim or distanced himself from being a Muslim? That is not what Rishi Sunak has done. Sunak has not distanced himself from being a Hindu. Sharma has not distanced himself from being a Hindu. And Priti Patel, of course, has not disowned her Hindu Gujarati background. And whether they distance themselves from their religious faith group origins, these members of parliament in both Labour Party and the Conservative Party, what are they doing? What are they doing about racism? Because none of them, not a single one of them has actually made a stand against racism. Not a single one of them in either Labour Party or in the Conservative Party. Either in the House of Parliament, House of Commons, or in the House of Peers. The question is, if anyone disagrees with what I'm saying, they're welcome to send the evidence, containing clear evidence that actually constitutes evidence and proof that any of them, whoever it is, has been engaged in opposing racism in Parliament. I said that they are not engaged in opposing racism. Because when these people have been massacred, in the channel, and it is absolutely undeniable that they were massacred. And the Guardian is saying that there are claims that these sinking migrants in the channel did make attempt to contact the British authorities. The British authorities are, of course, denying that. But it is not something that will stick. The denial will not stick. And the Guardian today also running this piece about the treatment of this man from Ghana who has been denied return to the UK after he went to Ghana to bury his father in Ghana. He's back in Britain now, but he was refused return for 2 years. Now, this woman who has written the piece is Boris Johnson's sister-in-law. Amelia Gentleman is married to Joe Johnson, who is Boris Johnson's younger brother. So let's see what this piece about Richard Amoa reads like, exiled for 975 days, how the Home Office turned my life upside down. Richard Amoa went to Ghana for his father's funeral and found himself barred from returning to Britain for 2.5 years. Like other victims of the Windrush scandal, he is owed compensation. But what will he actually get? Now, this sentence, like other victims of the Windrush scandal, is stupid. This man is from Ghana, and he was not a Windrush generation, anything. Now, this article, byline to Amelia Gentleman, who is married to Boris Johnson's younger brother, and has been showered with dozens of awards for her journalism. But she's a racist. Because in this piece, there is no reference to racism. There is no reference to human rights. There is no reference to the UK's actively breaking international treaty obligations. So he's not like another victim of the Windrush generation. He's a victim of racism by the British. And the way Amelia Gentleman has described the Windrush scandal by the Home Office, the hostile environment, doesn't make the behavior or the policy or the conduct racist. It paints the racism as botched behavior, bungled behavior, incompetent behavior. Essentially, they are not only those things. Those things do apply, but essentially, the behavior of the Home Office is most centrally racist, colonialist, imperialist. And yet, Amelia Gentleman's speech today, Thursday, the 2nd of December 2021, doesn't have any reference to racism whatsoever. There is no reference to rights. There is no reference to international treaties. There is no reference to the dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of charters, agreements that the United Kingdom has been a signatory to for decades. So when Diana Abbott would appear in front of Andrew Neil alongside Michael Portillo, she would not deliver a substance. She never did deliver a substance whatsoever. Talking about substantive racist, substantial opposition to racism. So what we are going through intellectually in this country is a kind of dark age, evil age, darkness, where nothing is substantial. Nothing like the massacre of the refugees is treated substantially with substance, with kindness, with seriousness that deserve, and the way that would stop such behavior being repeated again. It is 8 days since the people are massacred. And instead of running an in-depth legal, constitutional, evidential, factual, ethical, and moral big read, none of the papers including the Guardian, is running anything like that. So they have written off these people, the victims of the massacre. But that's not the only thing. For 2 years now, since Johnson got back into number 10 with the renewed, reinforced numbers of votes, 80 plus, Fleet Street papers have been running one aspect of the campaign of hatred and hostility and denial after another. And none of the newspapers has been publishing any of that. That is, the fact that there have been wanton incitement. So it's like massacre by intentional neglect. Massacre of the 30 people, 31 people or 27 people, whatever number is accepted as the main number for the time being. Priti Patel has been in the news, propping up the image of her government, her regime, and her kind of cabinet as being very, very patriotic and doing their best to deter these bad people, the seekers of asylum, the seekers of refuge. And as the accounts now emerging show, these are very ordinary people, very innocent people. So Johnson has been in need of a massacre like that so that he could rail against the French, which itself is completely unfounded because the French have scored several political points against Johnson this week. The latest being that Macron has got quite wide publicity against Johnson, whom he has called a clown. If the international media had accepted Johnson's lies against the migrants, then they would not have been running the significant number of rebuffs against Johnson that originated from Macron. And so therefore the massacre of these refugees was of course orchestrated to suit Boris Johnson's murderous congenital careerist agenda. But that massacre has not produced favorable publicity for Johnson, despite the fact that the likes of the Daily Mail, the likes of the Murdoch scum, the likes of the daily bribing Boris Johnson graph, they have all been loyally shielding and propping up the image of Boris Johnson and Priti Patel. So we shall be continuing in due course because these are grave issues, serious issues at every level. And none of the press, none of the Fleet Street is actually doing justice, anything like the justice that each of the victims deserves. Each of the victims of the massacre and each of the victims of other racism, other hostility of